Thank you ever so much for everybody for being here today. It's Global Entrepreneurship Week. The topic this year is Entrepreneurs Thrive Here. Now, that is a really broad brush topic, but we can get really specific, and we're going to get really specific today, talking about procurement and payments, not just in the private sector, but we have the great pleasure of being able to talk about it in the state sector. And we have a number of experts on with us today, which I'm delighted to introduce. So first of all, I'm Sam Acton. I'm the franchisor of Domestic Angels. And if we could just go around the room, Shirley.
I'm Shirley Cooper, and I'm the Crown Representative for Small Businesses.
Thank you. Ian?
I'm Ian Joel. I'm the head of the Public Procurement Review Service.
Anne-Marie?
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Martin, founder and franchisor of Diddy Dance.
And Alex?
Hi, I'm Alex Chidicimo, and I work on the Public Procurement Review Service.
Thank you ever so much, everybody. And we'll have Liz Barclay, the Small Business Commissioner, joining us in a short while. We're going to talk about procurement and payment processes within the state sector to start with. And the reason this came up is I was in a really vibrant discussion in Westminster, which was being chaired, and people were talking about how payments need to be speeded up in the private sector, and it's still being addressed. It's been addressed a lot. Liz is going to give us some updates on that, but more needed to be done. And together with a few other ladies, I raised the question to say, but what about the state sector? Because when it takes a while for invoices to be paid, for small businesses, it can feel like the size of a mortgage payment is missing for a few months. And what about the procurement process, which can be mysterious? As a result, the Global Entrepreneurship Week team asked if we would put this webinar together and basically have a good old chat about those subjects and see what comes out of the pot that might help entrepreneurs to thrive here just that little bit more. So that's why we're here today. I'm probably going to just ask Anne-Marie to chat first of all about how some of the experiences with her small businesses, and I'm going to then add to those and then come over to Shirley and Ian to talk about how they feel about those things and how they can reflect it. So Anne-Marie, you've got a couple of examples for us. Would you mind sharing them?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think for us in the children's education sector, we're providing services into both public and private sector early years settings. Also, we do intergenerational work into care homes as well. And I think I'd love to know about any official barriers or parameters that we're within that actually we're having a few issues. I've had franchisees discuss that because of the services we offer, they either aren't considered because they're not a charity or a CIC. And also barriers because actually when they do find a contract that is open to small businesses, that actually they're then eliminated because they're a sole trader and not a limited company. So that would be a couple of discussions that I'd be really interested in. Thank you.
Oh, those are brilliant points, actually, brilliant points. From our point of view and from talking to other businesses, the kinds of things that stop small businesses from getting involved are the mysteries of the procurement process in local government. So there might be small, micro or even small businesses, just as Anne-Marie has described, and therefore may not aspire to national government provision, but local government provision. However, the procurement process is a mystery. And you might submit an invoice because you've got an agreement with somebody to do the work, but the invoice doesn't get paid because you haven't completed the procurement process. But actually, nobody tells you what the procurement process is. So there's a mystery going on there. And then, of course, the local council is very likely to dictate that they're going to pay on 90 days terms. And of course, as small businesses, we're going to say, when we left the supermarket last, we had to pay as we left because it's their terms. So there's a couple of key things there that would be really good to cover off along with the points that Anne-Marie has just raised. So Shirley, Ian, who would like to get in there first?
Do you want to chip in first, Shirley? Or...
Okay, Ian, I'll just start off by saying there is change afoot here. So I understand we can't change the past, but we can change the future. And in 2023, a bill went through Parliament called the Procurement Bill, and it came into legislation as the Procurement Act 2023, which will go live in February 25, which actually changes a lot. It's the first time in a generation that small businesses have been front and central of an act that makes change happen. So maybe as a consequence of this, we may attach some notes for all the watchers on this programme about what the Procurement Act means for small businesses, because all buyers across government, and that means local government as well, will need to have regard for small businesses as they're going to market. And the objective and the opportunity is to build pipelines so you can see what's coming, so people can bid for the work or see where the contracts may be and look for the opportunities. I'll leave Ian and Liz to talk about payment terms, but the Act for me is one of the main reasons why I was appointed, because of my procurement background and being an entrepreneur myself. I'm absolutely thrilled to see small businesses part of legislation to make change happen. I can also tell you, as of today, 15,000 buyers across government have been trained, certified under the new legislation, so they understand what the new rules will be and what they will adopt and apply. And it's a cultural change to make sure that we think and act differently and have small businesses in their proposed thoughts of how they're going to go to market, when they're going to go to market, and how they could consider using SMEs in this space. It's a game changer, but it's a journey. So 15,000 people have been through the training already. There's more to come. 30,000 people have watched the knowledge drops, and anybody on this webinar can actually watch the knowledge drops, so you can visually see what's coming. Some are set up specifically for suppliers to consider what it will mean for them. But I'll also, if you wish, send you some paperwork of what, in simple terms, the Procurement Act means. It's about this thick in paperwork. I've got a 2-pager in the highlights. I think it's a game changer. Whilst with issues in the past in some places, it's been listened to. The legislation's here and now. And also the new Minister Gould, I was with her this morning, the National Procurement Policy Statement. We may have all heard of it before, may not. This year is a game changer for that one, because she's owning it and wants to consider even more to support small businesses and to support the UK economy and the growth thereof. So that's just an outline of where the Procurement Act can help in this space.
This is a really exciting time to be having this conversation.
Yes,
I'd agree. Incredible. That's incredible. There we go. That was fortuitous. You mentioned some training drops, links. Would we be able to put those links at the end of this webinar and the closing titles for people to access themselves easily rather than searching around? Oh, yes. Brilliant. That's fantastic. You referred to this about being a cultural change. It sounds like it is. Can you describe for our audience what that cultural change is? Because it's sounding like quite a significant shift from here to here and stepping across quite a massive gap.
The gaps will be different in different places, like the tube lines. When you're getting off the train, there might be big gaps and there might be little gaps. So I was on a call yesterday, for example, and across the whole of government and local government, we've set up communities of practice. There were 300 people on the call yesterday as we're talking have regard for small businesses, and we're training the buyers across government to have regard. What does that look like? How will they do that? And that is the cultural change, because in the past, if you're buying something, you typically buy what you've bought before and just get on with it. Now we're asking them to have regard for small businesses even more than they did before. They're already buying from small businesses like Anne-Marie's and many others. We're asking them to go to a whole new level of looking at how they can engage more in their communities, in their areas, and what could they do differently, bringing in innovation, helping growth for small businesses, looking locally, all those things. So it's how is the big opportunity, really, and that's what they're keen to engage with. Some we're all different people, some are already there, others are taking on that journey, and we're going to do that through case studies and working together and giving people the confidence to do things differently.
That's fantastic. So essentially, that work is helping the people who work across local governments to open their minds to actually engaging with small businesses rather than negating them from the get-go, because they do have parameters about what levels of spend they need to get checks on at different management levels. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the person who's actually buying or securing is going to look at a small business. They might go for something that's bigger because they're thinking, I've got to be responsible and secure, and don't understand that a small business can be extremely responsible and probably more secure, and they're closer to hand rather than being owned by a foreign company. So that's great. So a great big cultural shift on that part. Okay, so probably, Ian, this is your moment to explain to us what this new act is, and what it contains, and what the difference is between now and what's about to come in, what we can look forward to enjoying.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I start by doing a little bit of scene setting, see what we have now. Obviously, we've already got procurement regulations in place, and my team's in place for the Public Procurement Review Service, or a service offered by the Cabinet Office. And our job is, where a supplier's got a problem with the procurement, they can report it through to us, and we'll do an investigation of it. We're an impartial body. Sometimes we find in favour of the supplier, sometimes we find in favour of the customer authority, but we'll look at any problem that's brought to us fairly and try and resolve it. So we deal with about 150 cases a year. They're a mixture of payment cases and procurement cases. And I think today, and Alex, jump in if I've got these numbers wrong, we've unlocked about £13.2 million worth of late payments due to blocked invoices. And they range from multi-million pound invoices, but some of those invoices are 60, 70, 80 pounds from a small enterprise that just needs that cash flow through. And we don't make any distinction in terms of, there's no threshold at which we'll help anybody who brings something to us. And we do have some limited powers under some historic legislation to do those reactive investigations. Now, as Shirley said, in the new Act, there's a lot of strengthening of the clauses to do with payment and to do with consideration about small businesses. There's an explicit obligation to take small businesses into account. There's an explicit section 68 that talks about every public sector contract is going to be on 30-day terms or less than 30 days, and also puts an obligation on that public sector body that if they dispute an invoice, or if there's something wrong with the invoice, like it's missing a purchase order number, they need to tell you. So they can't just not pay and leave you to wonder why it didn't get paid. They have to let you know what the problem is. And that means there's a kind of much greater range of things you can bring to us as a complaint that we can investigate. So we can look into payment much more easily. We can look at if you think you've been excluded from procurement because they're not looking at sole traders, for example, and you don't think that's fair. Again, we can investigate things like that. So there's a much broader range of things we can look at. There are also other bits of the team that are being formed, a procurement review unit. Some of those bits will be able to look proactively at issues. So before you're bringing problems to us, there's a team that should be starting to look at patterns that there might be out there, and basically getting involved before somebody puts their head above the parapet. Because we know from our experience, some of the suppliers who bring issues to us, they're super nervous. They don't want to get a bad reputation. They don't want to sound like a troublemaker. We do investigations anonymously, so we don't give your name to their buyer. So we know who you are, but we just say a supplier's raised a complaint. Very difficult to do that in payment cases because they need to know who to pay. But in procurement cases, we can investigate without them knowing who's raised the problem. And where we're looking at best practice, we're looking at compliance with regulations, all of that kind of thing. One of the other points I just want to raise before passing it back to you is, and this is going to sound like a bureaucratic thing, but it's super valuable. There's an increased obligation on buyers to make records of how they make particular decisions. So if there's a decision somebody's made, and this is where I think it's really valuable, if a decision somebody's made is excluding you unfairly from a competition, they should have a written record of how they came to decide that, what evidence did they base that decision on, and what kind of outcome are they trying to get. So it should be much, much easier to interrogate why procurement's put together in a particular way, and what the kind of the pros and cons of that decision. If it's blocking small enterprises from applying, is that for a valid reason? Is there an upside that balances that out? Or are they just guilty of a little bit of habitual thinking where we're used to do it like this, so we're just going to keep doing it like that? So there's a much greater range of things we can look at and challenge, and a much stronger evidence base to look at that.
That's really interesting. So the two big highlights that come out of what you've just explained is that there is a very clear and intensive system for reporting and investigating if there are issues in this delivery, which is a great way of supporting this transition, because it is a massive change. It's a massive change of habit, not just for central government, but for local government and for any of the state-run institutions, for schools, for NHS and any of those structures. So there's a lot to do there. So whilst as an entrepreneur, I'd go, why are you obsessed with it going wrong? We just need to make it go right. You are actually right. You need to support the transition process because it's such a big cultural shift. So that is a really great thing that's come out of it. And the other highlight out of what you said was about 30-day terms. This is big news for the SME sector, really big news, because if you're delivering a service that involves wages, waiting 90 days is actually painful, because you're going to have paid out 3 months worth of wages if the contract is ongoing, which hopefully it is, before you even get paid for 1 month's worth of work. So to change this to 30 days terms is a massive positive step in the right direction. So thank you ever so much for bringing that to our attention. It's really great to share that kind of thing today. You started to link into Anne-Marie's point about small business owners not necessarily being limited companies, but still being valid traders and suppliers in a local area. I think this is one to dig into just a little bit more for lots of different reasons, to highlight the fact that not everybody wants to be a limited company, especially it means your tax bill goes up considerably now. It might be a good idea to de-escalate that status or change to an LLP or something like that, depending on how you want to deal with it. Because if you are a solo person, then this has a big impact, but it doesn't mean that you are less valid as a delivery person. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about how local governments in particular might connect to those people, not just because of the barriers or maybe the concerns that local officers might have, but also with local governments in particular, their funding, a big chunk of their funding comes from council tax. That's local money. And a really great thing that could happen from the changes that you've been talking about is that local money is spent locally. So it stays in the area rather than contracting out to the bigger companies that are further away, then having to travel in if there's travelling in involved, or deliver in if there's lorries involved. And also are quite often owned by much bigger companies that might not even be British. So there is an opportunity about keeping the money locally and within Britain here. Can you tell me your thoughts on how those small business owners who might not be limited can be on the radar for those kinds of contracts?
Do you want me to answer some of that question, Ian? Just thinking about the changes that are coming for having regard, and the new Act brings with it a new digital platform. It's called the Central Digital Platform, and it will work like most of it. We'll all have been involved with HMRC over the decades and seen how that's evolved when it went digital a couple of decades ago, and seen how it's morphed into something amazing that you can actually do a one-stop shop for your HMRC work, VAT and everything else. The digital platform goes live on the 24th of February 2025, the Central Digital Platform. So you only need to register. All organisations and sole traders will need to register if you're interested in working across government, wider government, from what I understand. So from an admin point of view, do it once, do it well, and you're there. You can also then register for what contracts you're interested in. And so as all organisations will be able to promote what they're looking for in a pipeline and in tenders, And I'm not sure to the level of the smaller contracts of how that will be populated and how it will work. But from a central point of view, in a local area, you will only have to register once, and then you're covered for anything you do in that region or any region, and look for opportunities in that locality. From this early stage of what organisations, schools or care homes are looking for, they could use that platform to register that they're looking for sole traders to deliver X, Y and Z, if that's the way they want to work with that. I think that will be a huge success of this new digital platform, that everybody can promote the work that they have in the same place. And you can put searches on there to be prompted when an organisation's looking for the skills that you have. That's the plan.
That's the plan. Okay, so that's the plan TBC for the 24th of February 2025. And that sounds like a really interesting platform to be connected with. But as you said, might not catch all of the very much smaller items, but maybe that's to come. Or I guess you'll be able to put on there and say which region you want to operate in, as well as which sector. Okay, fantastic. Anne-Marie, have you got any questions that's coming out of this?
No, I was just actually having a little look on contract finders at the moment. And so that was really useful that you said all that, Shirley, because I think that will save so much headache, because you're always, once you do then apply for something, you're always met with endless amounts of different forms, and especially going through different academy trusts or different partnerships of schools, the amount of paperwork you then have to do for each one, it does add up. So just one central one will be fantastic. So it all sounds really positive to me.
So it's going through testing at the moment.
If you need any testers, we know lots of small business owners who might be great guinea pigs, even if it's in a dummy arena. And that could be quite handy, because obviously they speak a different language and they are at least 3 times removed from the familiarity of the system that's being proposed yourself. In many ways, this is what you're talking about is going to overcome the barriers to entry for micro and SME businesses, which is around the practicals, the financials, and of course, the final bit is the self-belief. And when there are those practical and financial barriers, the self-belief drops dramatically, because they just don't believe that they can complete the process. Are you reassured that the process will be fairly simple for the central digital platform?
It's been engineered in a way that it's straightforward. I haven't seen the full delivery of what the thing looks like, and it is going to be well tested that it's straightforward to use it. It has to be able to work for the multi massive organisations, the BTs of the world, all the way through to that. So I think enter once and enter well, so to speak. It might seem a bit clunky I don't know, I've not seen it, but my thoughts are that it might be a bit over engineered for a sole trader, but once you've done it once, you've done it. And then you don't need to do it again. You just then go looking for the contracts that you're interested in. My dream would be, and I had a meeting with the minister this morning, my dream would be that we have cross-government, across areas, that say, for example, in Leeds, you've got the MOJ hosting an event for looking for something in particular, and invites all other organisations that are in Leeds, the local council, the hospital, this, that and the other, to come to the same place. So all the SMEs that are interested in that space could come to one event to meet the buyers. And that would be my dream, that we actually join the dots across government, across local businesses, across local areas. So whatever it is that they're going out to market for, one person picks up the tab, or one organisation doesn't, everybody else joins in. And so we're making streamlined efficiencies, or however it works financially, because that's the biggest blocker. Where do they find the budgets to do shared support to get at to find the SMEs, the sole traders that we're looking for? And that will be one of my missions, to encourage all the buyers across government to actually talk to each other. And we've set up communities of practice because of the new legislation across the whole piece. And we're getting 400, 800 people on a call to talk about what does this mean in practice. So as part of this new energy, I'm hoping that they'll say we can do this for each other and we can support each other in a locality. So if Anne-Marie's looking to do things in Warrington or Manchester, wherever, you've actually got a whole community of people trying to find you. That would be a great success of the communities of practice that we've created across government.
Well, it's all sounding very positive and ideal at the moment. So let me throw in a curveball, because a good discussion wouldn't be a good discussion without a curveball. One of my small businesses had an experience within the last year or two when a social worker approached a franchisee to secure services to a client with special needs. That's fine. We do that kind of work all of the time. And so the angel was appointed and everything was underway, and the invoice was submitted and the invoice wasn't paid, and another one went in, another one went in, another one went in. And it took us a long time to figure out that the procurement department, the team, were not authorising the invoices to be paid because that particular business had not successfully completed the procurement process. Now, this was because the social worker appointed, and the social worker doesn't know the process. And why would there a social worker? So when we approached the procurement team, they said, you should have been taken through the procurement process by the social worker. And it's, well, they're experts in being social workers. You're the experts in being in procurement. I don't think that is probably a fair comment to make. Anyway, they gave us a few bullet points, that was it, and I helped my franchisee to get through there, and the payment started to come in. But in amongst all of that time, a huge amount of phone calls and emails took place with a very bewildered and distressed social worker who was devastated that we'd had to, in this situation, actually suspend services because the invoices weren't being paid. And during the time we were trying to help the procurement team understand that actually we are not psychic. We don't know how they operate, and small businesses and SMEs just do not think the same as them or have the same compliance as they might do. I'd really like to know how that particular barrier might be overcome with the plans coming forward, how the mysteries of engagement on that procurement process will be peeled away so that people can work more healthily.
Do you want me to pick that up a little bit, Shirley? Yeah, that's something we already help with a fair amount, and we've dealt with it with social work. We've also dealt with it with things like translation services, or it's somebody very much on the front line who's commissioning the services that doesn't necessarily understand their own organisation's internal processes. And we've locked payments in a fair number of those cases. But I think one of the things that I've talked about in terms of there now being a kind of proactive unit that can look at things like that is if we're seeing a pattern of these things happening. So maybe it's across social work, maybe it's across translation services, maybe it's elsewhere, where small contracts are being put in place that are then following through with payment because the organisation hasn't followed its own processes. That's something the procurement review unit, the compliance service, can look into, and that service is able to then not just give guidance to those individual organisations, but it's within their powers to publish general guidance across the sector, like local authorities or hospitals, say, where that guidance really addresses whatever that systematic problem is. If we identified that it was a lack of internal communication about those processes, we could give advice for them to follow about how to let their frontline staff know about their internal processes, or whatever the problem turned out to be as a root cause. So that there's going to be a body that would be able to address those sort of repeated issues if it's affecting a lot of people.
It strikes me that a very simple solution, because I don't expect social workers to become procurement officers or anything else, to be quite honest, or vice versa, that a simple video, cartoony type video that you get in local government in terms of compliance tasks, is made so that if a social worker or any other representative of local government or even national government secures somebody, they don't have to remember or learn or take a degree. They can say, great, I've appointed you, I'd like you to deliver this service. Here's the video that tells you what you need to do next in terms of your accountancy. So it's just simple delivery and everybody's really clear.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I think the easier we can make them, the more we can demystify procurement, and the easier we can make it for people to understand the way that they should be doing things. I think the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And that should include who to contact if there's a problem for whoever's sourcing the financing, because that's not clear either. And when you're a small business and you're phoning up 3 or 4 people before you get to the right person, there's a lot of time used and it's very emotional. And that's where the self-belief barrier of entry starts to really escalate. And I think it's really important to take care of that.
Yes.
Brilliant. Alex, you've been very quiet in this discussion so far, listening attentively. Have you got anything you'd like to add at this point?
No, I think Ian's covered a lot of things from the PPRS side, but I'm here if you have any questions regarding our numbers or anything like that regarding PPRS.
Okay, great. All right then. I'd like now to introduce Liz Barclay to the conversation, if possible. Liz, if you'd like to show yourself.
I'm here.
Hello.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi. So Liz has joined us today as a small business commissioner who deals, well, predominantly with the payment process, but also very keen on the procurement process in the private sector and how that can be improved and evolved. So we've had loads of updates from Shirley and Ian today. Liz, what updates have you got from your point of view to share with our audience?
I've got quite a few, but just before that, I'd love to pick up on a couple of points that you made that I think are as relevant to my private sector businesses as they are to Shirley and Ian's public sector businesses. And that was, one, you're not psychic. Small businesses are just, we're not clairvoyant, I keep saying. So we don't know, if we're a small business, how your process works if you're my bigger customer. So please, can you onboard me? Can you, I know it's jargon, can you tell me everything right at the start? Now, the problem is I'm a small business and I know how my processes work, but I don't know how yours work. So therefore, I'm not likely to ask all the relevant questions. So I need you to communicate with me in an accessible way that I fully understand, so that we both get it right from the beginning. And I keep saying, can we make the contracts simple and so that they actually spell out how we're going to work together for the lifetime of this contract, and put in there all the terms that I need to understand, but also make sure that we agree how we're going to get paid when we do that, and that's written into the contract. And the other point I wanted to pick up on was the self-belief thing. It's very hard as a small business, especially if you're a sole trader or a single person business of any sort, to navigate all the legislation and the regulations and the changes to all of those regulations, and then the expectations of the customers and everybody else around the way if there's just you. And it's really difficult to keep your self-belief up if people aren't treating you with respect, aren't writing the contracts in ways that you can understand, aren't paying you when they say they're going to pay you. And you mentioned right at the start, Sam, 90 days, I think you said, is painful. It's painful to wait for payment for 90 days. It's not painful. It's the death knell of many small businesses.
Yeah.
Small businesses need to be paid much quicker. And in people's minds, there is a 30-day thing. I want them paid much sooner than that, because the sooner a small business gets paid, the more self-belief they have, the more confident they are, and the more likely they are to invest. And if you're not chasing those invoices, you've got an extra 3.5 hours a week to put into thinking about, how do I find new customers? Where you're sitting there with a sign behind you, the Global Entrepreneurship Network UK, and I think this is going out in Global Entrepreneurship Week, and that's what this is all about. The new Procurement Act, making it easier for small businesses, for entrepreneurs to be part of this. And so we've really got to think about how we get our entrepreneurs out there really supported properly in the way they need to for the stage of their business so that they can innovate. And innovate doesn't mean having ideas, it means delivering those ideas. And we are the best in the world at doing that. Small businesses in the UK are the talent that drives everybody else's success. So there, you've got my pitch. What's new? We are replacing the prompt payment code with the fair payment code, because I want to see people paid fairly and quickly, not just promptly, because there's no point in paying me promptly in 89 days instead of 90. I want to be paid fairly in under 30 days. I really want to be paid in 7 days, if at all possible. And it is possible, and lots of firms are doing that. So we're launching the new code, but also we sit under the Department for Business and Trade, and they are looking at how they can make big firms' payment performance data much more transparent than it has been. So they're going to be consulting on that in the new year. And we're also looking at whether or not I should have more powers. That's going to be consulted on too.
They're actually having that discussion, Liz. Oh my goodness. That's courage.
So there are new things coming all through next year.
Brilliant. That's really good to hear. I've got a question for you today, actually, Liz, which takes the payment process question to another level. When there are bad payers, and there are invariably the same offenders over and over again in that sort of like middle to large sector, where they just think they can get away with not paying, and it's a small business who's not getting paid. The process for recovering that payment is onerous and expensive. Is there any talk, or are there any plans of addressing that so that the smaller businesses feel that they can access that process to recover debts and call these people out faster, sooner rather than later? Because in some cases, I just talk around to people, and these small businesses are writing off debts that are really quite substantial for a small business, and they shouldn't be. And they're writing it off because going through the courts costs too much, and the process is just too much of a faff.
You come to me, you come to my team. I have a team that offers a free service that will help you as the small business either go through the process to get the money back yourself, or we can intervene on your behalf if you're willing for us to do that. Now, the problem that we have is that people like Anne-Marie are a bit worried about rattling a cage, because Anne-Marie, I think you would agree that you have a good working relationship with your customers, and you feel that if you come to me and say they haven't paid me and I want you to sort that out for me, they may then not give you the next piece of work. Am I right? Small businesses.
Absolutely. When you're looking at what feels like small fry to them, but actually it's so much of your weekly income and repetitive work, you definitely don't want to suddenly call up that setting and be like, oh, my invoice is still 3 months due, and you're constantly chasing because you feel like a burden, and then you're worried that whole contract will then just be taken away from you like that.
Yes. And so people are scared to do that because they don't want to damage the working relationship. They want the next piece of work, and they're very fearful. If you come along to us and give us all the information that we need, we will not act. We will not do anything unless you give us your consent. So in the main, the companies that do, the small businesses that do give us their consent, usually have decided they're not going to ever work with that customer again anyway. Because if you're not getting paid, it's a hobby, not a business. So what we would say is, if you've got to the point where you want us to help you, that's great. We will intervene on your behalf. And in 99.9% of cases, I think, my team tell me, we get you paid. And we get paid small sums. I think last year, anything from 68 quid up to a few 100,000. But all those sums matter. For some small businesses, that 68 quid is just as important as 100,000 was to somebody else. We will help you. If you don't want us to intervene, we will support you through the process so that we can tell you all the way along what it is that you can do in order to get your money back. Now, you're also entitled to, of course, if your invoice is not paid by the due date, you're entitled to charge interest on that. Now, the sums of interest on a small invoice are probably going to be quite small, but you can also charge compensation, depending a lump sum of compensation from £40 upwards, depending on how much your invoice was for in the first place. And we can talk you through that as well. Again, small businesses don't tend to do that unless they're not going to want to work with the organisation again. But I think there's a very clear message that we need to give to the bigger business, and that is actually that small business could stop working with you, and you may have paid them late over the past 6 years. And they could come after you for the whole of that 6 years of interest and compensation that you were late. And we had a case like this on Friday, where the gentleman was being chased by a supplier for 6 years of debt, and he was facing a bill of £10,000. Now,
Wow.
I think you should be thinking to yourself at this point in time, hang on a minute, I'm not going to pay late in future, I'm going to pay on time. And I also think that for many businesses, and Sam, you mentioned in that middle band, there are a lot of them in that middle band that haven't looked at their processes for a long time. The processes are no longer up to date and fit for purpose. They need to be digitized, and that will make things a lot quicker. But they just haven't had the time, the money, or put the effort into it, or their board has simply said to them, no, you're not spending the money on that. So businesses always have conflicting requirements as to where they are going to spend their money. But my message is, if you're contracting with Anne-Marie, you have to pay her when you say you're going to pay her. Otherwise, you're using her as a bank, and that is simply not fair.
And I find it extremely reassuring that we've got Liz Barclay saying that, actually, because if I was contracting from Anne-Marie and I heard Liz say that, I'd pay.
Shirley, Ian and I together, we're going to make a decent attempt at solving it in both the public sector and the private sector.
Liz, we're going to be putting some links on the closing slide. I'd really love it if there is an email address that is to your team that helps. You've just talked about, that would be really great, so that anybody who finds themselves in that position who would like to reach out and ask for help, that they can do that straight away by seeing a link on the end. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. We have got a form on our website. You simply fill it in and somebody will get back to you. And we will. We do.
Yeah, okay, so we have the link to that form, stick it on the end, and then people can access it really easily. That's fantastic. Yeah, thanks ever so much. Gosh, we've covered an awful lot of information. I think this has been a really positive opportunity and discussion, and a good learning moment for all of us, and hopefully for our audience. So before we close off here, can I just do a round robin to see if anybody's got anything they'd like to add? If I start with you, Shirley.
So thank you very much for the opportunity of talking with your network on Entrepreneurs Week. So really thrilled to have been here as the Crown representative for small businesses. Please bear in mind the Procurement Act 2023 that goes live in February, 24th of February, and everybody will be required as suppliers to government to register on the central digital platform. You should be getting notification of it through the mechanisms that you're already working with government. But if you're not already and want to, there will be a link that I will send through to give you the knowledge drops and the paper that tells you, in summary, 2 pages, what the Procurement Act's all about. And if there's anything I can support the network with, as a female entrepreneur myself in the past, I'd be thrilled to support you and your networks.
Thanks ever so much, Shirley. And I think I'd like to highlight the point that actually this is for people who are not necessarily already supplying. We're wanting to reach out and incorporate and engage with far more businesses. Thank you for that. Ian?
Yeah, to echo Shirley, it's a pleasure to come along today. Thank you for the opportunity to invite. Just to stress the word live service right now. We've done a lot about talking about the new act in February, but live now. If anybody listening to this has a payment issue in the public sector from a public sector body right now, there'll be a link to our, similar to Liz, we've got a form. There'll be a link to that we'll supply you with. Just fill that form in and we'll get onto that right away.
Thank you very much. Alex?
Yeah, thank you. It's been a really interesting conversation, so glad to be a part of it. And Ian said, please feel free to contact the Public Procurement Review Service for help with late payments.
Thank you. Anne-Marie.
I found it a really positive discussion. I'm really excited about the new digital platform. I think we're all discussing about being proactive rather than reactive. And so if you are uploading all of that documentation and compliance that you need up front, you shouldn't then be presented, like Sam was discussing, that you haven't completed all the documentation. So that's why you haven't been paid. So I'm looking forward to that. And just one quick question, which I don't want to open a new can of worms, and I'm sure there's time for another discussion. But Liz, on a private sector contract basis, is there any knowledge or quick tips that would protect a small business if they're chasing payment and then that business was to go into administration? Where would they stand?
Very difficult one. You're usually
Right.
a creditor at the bottom end
Yes.
of the list of priorities.
Yes.
So you have to safeguard yourself the whole way through rather than wait until that's happened. And we've got quite a lot of that has happened in the construction sector in the past few months. And we're really distraught to discover that the subcontractors are the ones who are carrying the can. So please don't leave it until it's too late. Come and talk to us first. And don't go to court before you come and talk to us, because the court process, as you've pointed out, is long, it's clunky, it's costly, Sam, and we can probably help you before you get there. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. And Liz?
I thank you again for the opportunity. We need to be able to get out there and talk to people. That's the most important thing, because just because you build something doesn't mean that people will find it. So we need to be out there engaging with people. It's not my area, but on the procurement front, just a very small story. About 2 Christmases ago, I talked to 20 procurement officers in local authorities, and one said to me, I had this wonderful tender to put out, and I got 200 expressions of interest from small businesses. He said, I was so excited because the ideas were absolutely amazing. And I thought, we're going to get a wonderful procurement here. He said, when it came to the bid, we only got 3 small businesses that actually went through the full procurement. So we have to change this, because he said, I lost all those ideas. I lost all those wonderful small businesses that I might have had in the system. So we have to change this, and the Procurement Act is a really stonking start. So please, even if you have to ask for a bit of help to get you there the first time, do it. It's worth it in the end.
One final thank you to all of you today for joining in this discussion. I really appreciate it. And I found it extremely interesting, really interesting. And I think it's been very balanced and very positive in so many ways. And I thank everybody who actually watches this. And I thank them even more if they click the links and take action and get involved and make use of the changes that are coming up and the opportunities that therefore are presented, and reach out for the support that is on offer. So thank you everybody for today.